Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. I hope that you are all well. Merry Christmas and happy Boxing Day. It is a Boxing Day for us here in Canada. This is where I talk about the books that I'm reading, and I like to read diverse books and I highlight Canadian literature. If you are new, thanks so much for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today, I am going to be basically wrapping up the Reading Across Canada Challenge for 2023. And I'm going to be giving recommendations for January for the 2024 challenge. I have a huge stack here. For December, we were reading a book set in or by an author from the Northwest Territories or Nunavut. And the prompt for the month was to read an Indigenous author. The prompt, hopefully, wasn't too difficult, as about half of the population, I think it is, in the Northwest Territories is Indigenous, and about 80 to 90% of the people in Nunavut are Indigenous peoples. Where the more complicated part might have been is that although Canada's north is very vast, the population is quite small. The Northwest Territories is about 45,000 people, and Nunavut has about 39 to 40,000 people. So both of the territories together is still smaller in population than most cities. However, there are writers from both territories, and their stories are very important for Canada. And I've mentioned this before, but when I was a kid, Canada only had two territories, the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. And it wasn't until 1999 that Nunavut became Canada's youngest province or territory, splitting the Northwest Territories. So Yellowknife is the capital of the Northwest Territories, and it's relatively close to the North Pole. The territory goes beyond the Arctic Circle, which is kind of cool. Nunavut is the largest province or territory with the longest coastline in Canada, which is really neat. And there are almost no trees in the territory except near the Manitoba border. And there are no roads in Nunavut. In the communities, yes, they have roads. But if you want to get to another place in the territory, you need to either fly, take a dog sled or snowmobile. Nunavut is also home to polar bears, and they have the highest percentage of Inuit, Métis, and First Nation peoples in Canada. So I have visited all of Canada's provinces and territories, except for these two territories. So they remain on my to travel list. And the book that I chose for December was Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq. Tanya Tagaq is from Cambridge Bay, Nunavut. And she is an Inuk throat singer and artist. And this book has been on my radar ever since it was published in 2018. I both read and listened to this on audio because a few people had told me to check out the audio, basically because it includes some throat singing. And if you've never heard throat singing before, it's very different than what you might imagine when you think of singing. There are no words. It is more of a guttural sound coming from the throat. And I have to say that this was the first time hearing throat singing alongside a story for me. And it had a big impact because the throat singing, this is going to sound strange, but in this case, it almost made me uncomfortable because it made some of what was going on in the story seem even more real. Like after a description of abuse or an assault, the throat singing took on an entirely new meaning to me. I can't even put it into words. And this doesn't mean that all throat singing, reminds me of horrible things like this happening or anything like that. That's not the case. This was the first time that I've ever had this kind of experience while listening, and it made the book more than just a book. The story in the book is about a young Inuk woman, and it's a fictional story, but I think that there's probably a lot of truth to it as well. There's also poetry, a very poetic language, and I think that this is a book, it isn't one that you can just read. I think this is one of those books that needs to be experienced. I don't know if I am making any sense, but I don't know how to really describe this adequately, and I think that's a compliment. It is unlike anything else that I've read, and I'm really glad that I read it for the challenge and for this prompt in particular. So now, like I always do, I will give you some recommendations for the next month. We will be starting the 2024 challenge in just a few days, in about a week. I announced the new challenge last week, and I will leave a link to that video in the description box below, so you can go and check it out. And I put all of the prompts there, the prompt sheet, so you can use it to follow along if you wish. For January, the prompt is to read a debut. Now, this isn't so tricky since you can choose any Canadian writer and read their first book. For those of you who might be looking for representation of different provinces, if you're trying to, hit every province throughout the year, I will talk about the provinces or territories that the authors represent and that the book represents. And I will also tell you if the books fit other prompts, because there is often overlap. So if you don't get to, a certain book this month, you can have it in mind for another month. I thought that I would first start with the debut books that are on the Canada Reads long list for 2024, since we already have that. If you are following Canada Reads, I will leave a link to the video where I go through the long list, and I'll put that in the description box below. If you are following along, this is an opportunity, I would say, to read a book from the long list, also for the Reading Across Canada Challenge, because there are 4 debut novels on the long list. There's Bad Cree by Jessica Johns, which I think would work for the provinces of Alberta or BC. This book would also work for May because it's a horror book. It would also work for June since the author is Indigenous. So a few options for this. And then Shut Up You're Pretty by Tanya Mutonji is on the long list, and it is a debut short story collection. Taya is from Ontario, so it works for that province. And this book would also work for the April prompt, since Taya was born in the Republic of Congo. It also works for September, since it is less than 200 pages. And it works for October because it has won the Edmund White, I think it's the Edmund White Award, and the Trillium Award. Happy Hour by Marlowe Granados is one on my radar as a potential read. This book is set in New York, and I love a good book set in New York. You all know this. Marlowe Granados lives in Ontario, so this would work if you are looking for books from the different provinces. And the last one from the Canada Reads long list is Sunshine Nails by Nguyen, who was born in Winnipeg, raised in Halifax, and lives in Toronto. The book is also set in Toronto, which means that this book is good for the provinces of, what did I just say? Manitoba, Ontario, or Nova Scotia. Okay, the next 5 books I am going to recommend because I've already read them. And first is The Boat People by Sharon Bala. This is a book about refugees from Sri Lanka who show up in BC. This was an eye-opening book for me to see how Canada treats refugees and immigrants. I am still waiting for Sharon Bala's next book, but if you haven't read this, it's definitely worth checking out. The story takes place in BC. Sharon Bala lives in Newfoundland, And this book could also work for April, since Sharon was born in Dubai. And for October, since it has won the Percy Jane's First Novel Award. The next book is one I've shown you many times, but I'm doing it again because it is so good. Anne-Marie MacDonald's debut, Fall on Your Knees. This takes place in Cape Breton, so the province of Nova Scotia is the setting for this. Anne-Marie MacDonald lives in the province of Ontario, and this book is massive. It is a chunky book, so it could be used for March's prompt as well, and it could also be used for April's prompt because Anne-Marie MacDonald was born in Germany. But now she lives in Canada, as I said, and it could also be used for June's prompt because Anne-Marie MacDonald identifies with the LGBTQ community. And it could be used for October's prompt because this book has won, I think, a number of literary awards. It's won the Commonwealth Writers' Prize for Best First Book overall, and many others. Next is a book that has writing and language like no other author I've ever read, and it's Rue by Kim Thuy. This is a gem of a book. Very lyrical, and the writing is just beautiful. This book is set in Quebec, which is also where Kim Thuy lives. This book could be used for a number of prompts as well. April, because Kim Thuy is from Vietnam. August for Women in Translation Month. It's translated from the French. And September, since this book is also less than 200 pages. And October, because the book has won literary awards like the Governor General's Award for Fiction in French. The next debut is Scarborough by Catherine Hernandez. I loved this book and how it was written. This book obviously takes place in Scarborough, which is Ontario. That's also the province where Catherine Hernandez lives. And I think that this is on my mind because I want to read both of her other novels, one of which is sitting on my shelf and I want to get to it. It's staring at me over there. This book would also work for June since Catherine identifies as queer. So the last book that I've read that I want to suggest is Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead. This is another book that I've talked about many, many times on this channel, but it works for Alberta, where the book is set. It also works for Manitoba, where Joshua Whitehead is from. It is a good choice for June, since Joshua Whitehead is Indigenous and identifies as Two-Spirit. I thought this one worked for Shorty September, but it's just over 200 pages. So depending on how strict you want to be, you could potentially still use it. It could also work for October since it has won some awards as well, including Canada Reads in 2021. These next books are books that I pulled from my shelf that I really want to read. So all of these are on my radar as potentials. First is Serious Blooms at Night by Shani Mutu. I really want to read more by this author. I loved her novel Polar Vortex, so I may go to this debut. The story takes place on a fictional island, so the setting doesn't really help if you are trying to read through the provinces and territories. But Shani Mutu has lived in BC, Alberta, and is currently in Ontario. And this book would also work for April and June because Shani Mutu was born in Dublin and identifies as LGBTQ. I just read The Innocents by Michael Crummey. It was longlisted for Canada Reads 2024, and I read it for the Newfoundland and Labrador prompt for the Reading Across Canada Challenge. And now I want to read more Michael Crummey books, and I have had his debut, which is River Thieves. This has been sitting on my shelf for over 20 years. This book can be used for Newfoundland, and I'm not sure where the setting is. My guess is Newfoundland, but I'm not positive, so I'd have to check that. But the book can also be used for June, as Michael Crummy identifies with the LGBTQ community. And it could be used for October as well. It has won a couple of literary awards, like the Thomas Riddell Fiction Award, and some others. Speaking of authors from Newfoundland, I have another writer who lived in Newfoundland for a long time and now lives in Quebec, so the novel could work for both of those. The book is Annabelle by Kathleen Winter. This book has been sitting on my shelves for at least 10 years, probably more. This book is a coming-of-age story and the struggles with gender and identity. The book could be used for April's prompt as well, because Kathleen Winter was born in the UK. And this book has also won a number of awards, so it could work for October as well. And my edition of this book is 480 pages. So depending, again, on how strict you want to be, you could consider this as a mammoth. Next up is an author from Ontario, and this is Fugitive Pieces by Anne Michaels. This is a book that I've heard such good things about, and it's also been on my shelf for over 20 years. I believe that the setting is actually the Holocaust, so I don't think the setting is linked to Canada. I could be wrong. But this could be read for October as well, since it has won a few literary awards. Another award winner is Childhood by Andre Alexis. I've read his Giller Prize book, 15 Dogs, but now I need to read his debut. Andre Alexis was born in Trinidad, so this debut could work for April. This could also work for February, for Black History Month, and of course October. And then the last book from my shelves that I want to share with you is Lullabies for Little Criminals, a coming-of-age novel by Heather O'Neill. This is an author that I have yet to read, although I have a few of her books on my shelf. Heather O'Neill is from Montreal, Quebec, and this is a winner. This book won Canada Reads several years ago, so it could be read for October as well. And then the final two books are not books that I own yet. However, I have pre-ordered the first one because it will be coming out in paperback sometime in January, sorry. So I may not have time to read this for January, but if that's the case, it could also work for February, and it's In the Upper Country by Kai Thomas. This book just won the Atwood Gibson Writers Trust for Fiction prize, and I've been wanting to read this ever since I first heard about it, which was before it was published. So this is high on my list this year. And then the last book that I want to share is another one that I don't own, but this author was new to me in 2023, and I have two of her books on my shelf, and I was thinking that I might start with her debut and then read her books in publication order. We'll see. And the debut is A Student of Weather by Elizabeth Hay. This story takes place in Saskatchewan in the 1930s Dust Bowl, when two sisters fall for the same man. And Elizabeth Hay is from Ontario and has actually lived in several places. I had the opportunity to meet her and learn more about her at a WordFest event. I talked about it here on this channel, and I think that I'm really going to enjoy her writing, and I'm putting this debut on all of our radars. So I will leave a list of these suggestions in the description box below, along with which provinces and territories they can be used for if you are trying to read a book from each of the provinces or territories. And if you were to use just these recommendations from today, you could potentially almost do the entire challenge. There would still be, I think, 2 territories and 2 provinces that would still need to be covered, but you'd be really close. So please let me know if you are reading for the challenge. What debut are you hoping to read? Do you have any debut books that you want to recommend, that you want to share, or that you would add to this list? Please share it so that we can all get some more great suggestions. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Merry Christmas, and I'll see you again soon. Don't forget to make every day an adventure.